All right, everybody, welcome to our Thursday Truth Seeking podcast here with Jay Young. And tonight, the topic of conversation is the idea of objective morality versus moral relativism. And so we're going to dive into that topic and see where it goes, man. So, how's it going, Jay?
Life's good. Life's really good. You and I were talking a little bit about migraines, and you had a potential solution, something that seemed to work for you. Do you want to tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, so I learned this from a guy named Clive DeCarl. I went to the Anarchadelphia conference in 2019, and he was a guy that really dove into health and his own health because of he got injured by a vaccine at one point. So, so he really dove into his health because the doctors weren't able to help him figure out what was going on. So, so he really did a deep dive. And one of the things that he talked about was that the majority of people are deficient in magnesium, and the signs of that are like restless leg, a lot of headaches, muscle cramping, things like that. And the reason is because a lot of people go through a lot of stress, and the body, to react to stress, it burns magnesium. And and so yeah, if you're in a real stress, or if you're in a high stress situation, a lot of times that you could be very deficient in magnesium. He also talked about how it was like 90% of people are deficient in magnesium because we're not getting it from the trace minerals in our soils and all that anymore. So this is the product that I use, and I've converted many of people by having them try it out. So yeah, I carry some of this stuff with me a lot, and whenever people are talking about having headaches and things like that, I'll whip some of this stuff out and have them try it. And usually when they try it, they say, wow, that really helps. So, and I use it anytime I get a headache or something like that. I'll apply it just on your skin.
Yeah.
Because that's actually, the largest surface area on your body is your skin. So, so that really gets into your system pretty quickly. And this is the stuff that I use, and I can vouch for. It's good stuff.
Do you know? So I do take just some basic minerals. It's just because, like you said, we just don't get enough sometimes from sources. Especially, we used to get it straight from the streams, right? We drink it right there. We can get it.
Yeah, drinking like mineralized water, basically from spring water and
that's right,
and stuff like that.
So I've been taking some minerals, and I just remembered that part of that, and I have not been as consistent as I should. One of the products in there is, I think it's called magnesium malate. I think that's it.
Okay.
So the magnesium you're talking about is basically, we have different delivery vehicles. Like what you're talking about is a topical. You showed me something else on Amazon. Magnesium glycate. Am I saying that correctly?
Magnesium glycinate.
Glycinate. Thank you. So is it basically, we're looking for ways of consuming bioavailable magnesium? Is that the ultimate goal with this?
Yeah. So there's different forms of magnesium that they sell as a supplement. And to my knowledge, magnesium glycinate is the most available one that our body can process through our digestive system.
Okay.
So yeah, there's different forms, and you really can't overdose on magnesium. The thing that'll happen is it'll give you disaster trousers.
Yeah. Okay. So you'll know. You have a clear indication.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll know if you take too much of it. It'll make you want to go to the bathroom really bad.
Okay. Hey, if it works,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Same thing with vitamin C. Vitamin C is something that a lot of people lack as well, and then it's a really powerful antioxidant.
Yeah.
From what I understand, and that one also, if you can get it in the powder form, is more readily absorbed into your body as well.
So I've learned something interesting about vitamin C, and this goes back to something I think you and I've talked about before, and I think we're on the same page in regards to where does the government get their numbers for their nutritional RDAs, recommended daily allowances, right? And if we look at what the government recommends for RDA for vitamin C, it's actually really high compared to what we really need. And what happens is if we're taking in sugars or carbs in general, I think ascorbic acid and glucose have very similar chemical structures. I think glucose has like one tiny little part on there that's like the only difference. And what ends up happening is the glucose in our system ends up flooding the cells. And so we need an inordinate amount of vitamin C just to kind of make it through and statistically be able to get into the cell. Versus if we just reduce our carb intake, then we actually don't need that much vitamin C. It can be down to the nanograms per deciliter, in there. And so, otherwise, you end up with the limeys, right? The British sailors, right, having to consume an enormous amount of vitamin C just to prevent scurvy.
Mm-hmm.
So, it makes you wonder where did the is it FDA? Where do they get their RDAs? Right? Are they getting them on the standard American diet, the SAD, or are they getting it from people who are really very low carb intake?
Right. Yeah, I didn't know that about absorption of vitamin C when you're talking about the glucose thing. So
Yep.
I'll have to look more into that.
I think I learned that from Dr. Anthony Chafee. He's a huge proponent of the carnivore diet, and he really gets down to the molecular level. And I've learned so much from him and so many of those other doctors, medical doctors who promote the carnivore diet.
Yeah, I really got interested in the carnivore diet after meeting a lady down in Anarchapulco when I went in 2020, Lily Forrester, and she was a vegan, and she had all these problems with her skin and all these breakouts and everything like that. And then she started learning about the carnivore diet through Michaela Peterson.
Sure.
And she started to try it, and her hair started growing in better. Her nails are better. Her skin all cleared up. Everything got a lot, just kind of generally all around her health really improved. So
yeah,
hearing her story about that really was like, okay, there's got to be something to this.
Yeah. I'm not going to go so far as to say that everyone should be on the carnivore diet, but I think everyone ought to look into it. They ought to do the research, like the real research, like the true epidemiological randomized control trials, right? The meta studies, right? And anything that reaches what they call the Bradford Hill criteria for causation, right? I think there are 9 criteria for causation. And, there are so many, there's just so much BS is floating out there that's been caused as causation. They're calling it causation. And that's just not true.
Yeah. Correlation is not causation. Yeah. I think we may have talked about this last time, but I have somewhat of a background in academia, and and then in research, you are funded by certain sources, whether that be from an industry or the government. And so all those people are seeking out funding to get funded for their research labs, right? So,
Yeah.
so a lot of times that research can get corrupted because of the money that's flowing in. So,
Yeah.
So they're kind of showing a bias for whoever is funding their research.
Yeah. That might be a topic for a future show. Maybe you can give us a little bit of your perspective about that one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely learned some things about how things really work when during that time. So, so yeah, getting into the topic tonight, objective morality versus moral relativism.
Yeah.
And
so I had asked you, like, what topic do you think will work well, and you immediately fired back. And this is a great topic, by the way. So I'm really glad you brought this up. So it sounds like you kind of you may have already had some ideas that have been floating around your brain housing group, or even like an opening monologue that you wanted to give. Is there something you want to share with us and kind of get us in the groove?
Yeah, so I wanted to say, so I'm a big follower of Mark Passio, and what he talks about is the science of natural law. And he states in natural law that there is an objective truth, that to our ability as human beings, we are seeking the truth, and it works on somewhat of a like a sine. If you imagine a sine wave, so we're always looking to gather new information to relate to what we're experiencing in our lives.
Yep.
Going back to the whole epistemology that we talked about in the last stream. How do we know what we know?
Yep.
And so we're always like attempting to approach the truth, and maybe we overshoot it and maybe we undershoot it. Yeah. But our goal over time is to try to find what the base reality is and the absolute truth. And natural law is all about, there are principles that govern this reality that are discoverable by your human action. So the idea would be like, go around and just start messing with a bunch of people and doing a bunch of bad stuff, not only to yourself but to the other people around you. Mm-hmm. And see how that works out for you, right? Mm-hmm. So kind of that idea of karma, like, payback is a bitch. And so these things are discoverable and dictate how our actions have consequences in reality. So whatever action you take has consequences, and those consequences may have a time lag to them, but those consequences will manifest themselves. So yeah, the idea is that there is a fundamental truth, and when you get away from that, you start getting into the idea of moral relativisms. How everybody says, like, I'm saying my truth, it's my truth because it's coming from my perspective. And once you start doing that, you start to degrade that foundational idea that there is an objective truth, there is an objective reality, and you can start to justify anything. And one of the biggest examples of this is how the communists wanted to destroy the idea of that objective truth and justify all types of evil, because they could justify anything at that point, because the only arbiter of what is right, it now becomes man and the state. And so yes, that's the basic premise of the whole argument. is that you have to like plant yourself in the bedrock of truth, basically, so that you sit on a foundation that is not easily destabilized. And if you look at human society as a system, you can see as morality starts to degrade, that your society starts to get chaotic and start to collapse. You know, we can see that in history, specifically like with the Roman civilization, how they had a severe moral decay that led to the decline of the Roman civilization. And you could present all kinds of other examples, you know, and if you look in the Bible and read about all the peoples in the past that have gone down this path of determining right and wrong from man, has gone astray. So yeah, that's the whole premise.
Okay. So you mind if I ask some opening questions to kind of get us kind of framed a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So from your point of view, if we're talking about objective morality, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's objective, does that mean it is A, universal, and B, measurable?
Yeah, that would mean that you can discover this. You can figure out by your observations that this has a real mechanism that you can perceive.
So then what would be your first principles to get things started? So you talked about you could, I forget, there's a phrase you just said, you could figure it out. Am I saying that correctly? Something along those lines.
Yeah.
So what would be your first principles where you would start to say, okay, I'm not saying what is or is not morality. What I'm saying is there are some certain axioms that we can start with that we know. Now, when you start with axioms, right, they're not provable on their own, right, at their own level. But what are your starting axioms when it comes to trying to define morality?
So basically, it really boils down to the actions that would be taken that would harm another individual, and that I guess you could break it down to basically theft, because any type of violence that you would initiate in order to do your will, so to say.
Yep.
That would be violating another person's individual rights to be safe and secure in their own person. So yeah, basically you could boil it down into theft
Okay.
as one of the basic principles there. And so it's not, I guess, when I say violence, like, I do think that, you know, self-defense is wrapped into that, because you own yourself. An individual owns themselves, otherwise you would be in servitude.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you own yourself and you are a part of the creation, you know, this creation, this reality that we live in, then you have the ability to defend your life, and that is morally justified.
Okay. So does this start to bring in the concept of rights?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
What would you consider? Do you have a good working definition for us for rights? Or what is a right?
So I would say a right is something that you are able to um, take action as an individual as long as it doesn't cause harm to another individual.
Okay. Okay. So taking action as long as it doesn't harm someone else. So what about professional football or MMA?
That's a good point. I mean, they're voluntary. Like people are voluntarily taking that taking on those sports that are involving violence towards other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that way, it makes you know it makes that possible, is that you're entering into that not under coercion or some type of external force. You're making your own decision to enter into that situation. So to me, that's doesn't violate that at all.
Okay. So uncoerced and fully aware.
Yeah.
Okay. Another example that I've used in the past is commodity traders, right? So for every futures contract, by definition, for every contract that's opened up, you have to have one party who's long and one person who's short that contract. And if the market's going up, the person who's long is benefiting, and the person who's short they're taking it in the shorts, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So one could say that the person who's long is harming the person who's short that position. But I think that fits in your criteria of it's voluntary, uncoerced, and fully acknowledged.
Yeah.
So what about, it starts to get a little bit into the concept of negative liberties and positive liberties, with negative liberties being any action that you as an individual can take on your own behest. But then there's a concept of positive liberties, and this kind of gets back to the idea we talked about last time of the four freedoms that FDR introduced. Freedom from want, freedom from I think it's hunger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were certain things that Barack Obama talked about in terms of positive liberties. Is there are certain things that he felt that the government should do for people, right? I.e. making egalitarian societies, etc. So what about the idea of if we introduce this idea of positive liberties, that where government can do things for people, such as providing food for people, where would that sit in the realm of rights, and where would that sit in the realm of morality?
It would be a violation, in my opinion, because you do not have the right as an individual to steal from another person in order to give that proceeds to another person. That would be a violation of that. So even if it's a good, it's called, for the greater good. A lot of times is justified as we need to do this for the greater good of society. It's still a violation because somebody has to take from somebody else in order to give to this person for this, morally just, so to speak, cause.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say, that would be a violation because of the fact of theft. Now you can kind of get into the argument like, well, they just can print the money into whatever, and it doesn't really matter if they take it from you. But at the fundamental level, if we're agreeing that these taxes and the idea of them going to this cause is going to be the way that happens, then it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
So what about, and we talked a bit about this in our chat a few days ago, that this can swerve into religion.
Yeah.
And
I do think you have to acknowledge that there is a creator of this reality once you start going down this road.
Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like what's your impression around that? And what do we do when we have two completely different people in two completely different religions, right? And I'm talking about completely different trees, right, of religions. What do we do when they arrive at the exact opposite conclusion for the exact same issue? Does that make sense?
So yeah, I mean, people are going to have different cultures and different perspectives, different religions, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they may dictate a different morality code in each one of those things, but nonetheless, there is a discoverable underlying rule set, I believe, to this reality that is dictated by the creator of this reality. And you can just look into the way that everything operates on this planet and how the design is with the fractal geometry. If you get into the fractal geometry of everything and start going deeper into some other works and how the whole thing seems to be connected and works in kind of a synergistic information feedback system.
Do you mean things like Fibonacci sequence and golden ratio, things like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
These underlying patterns of our reality and that show up, and the whole scientific argument is that there was a big bang that created everything. Well, where did all of that beginning material come from? To create, to spark everything off, and is it how can it be truly completely random events that build this thing that works so elegantly in reality? I would argue that not I don't fully know what this all is.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions about that, but even the idea that maybe there are higher dimensions potentially, and this is one of those dimensions that we exist in currently. I mean, that could be a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you even go beyond in those higher dimensions, then where was the genesis of all that? So yeah, I mean, you could call some people, you could call it basically just the universe itself, even, and it's just the observable effects that you have that on the actions you take have consequences. Like every action that you take is going to have consequences. You may not see those immediately, but they're in effect and dictate our reality.
Have you ever heard of the concept called the Tao, spelled T-A-O or D-A-O?
Yeah, the Tao Te Ching. Yeah, the way is what it's.
Yeah, right. They would translate to just the way. So and I'm gonna oversimplify and thus be wrong, right? But in terms of Buddhism or the study of the Tao, the way, it's the idea of it is the way of the universe, or it is the way of the world, how it operates. And what's interesting about it is that there's no there's no substance to it. There's no instantiation or of a thing that we can touch, which is the way or the Tao. It is just that constant process by which the universe is the way it operates, right?
Ordering itself. Yeah.
Whatever, right? Exactly. Whatever that is. And what's interesting is the really hardcore Taoists would even go so far as say, just by the fact that you're trying to name it, label it, right, you're missing the point. So, but then that gets into the whole concept of linguistics. It's like all language is a lie. It's a common lie we all agree on we try to agree on at some level, right? And just by using the word the Tao, we're kind of missing the point, and some would say, you can't describe it, you can't label it, but then you go back to the very beginning, like, okay, well then what are we talking about? Like, how are we defining this thing that we're not talking about? How do we define this thing you're telling me that I can't define? So anyway, it's a slightly different veer.
Yeah, I remember reading the Tao Te Ching a long time ago, but yeah, I mean, all the different religions of the planet, a lot of them kind of hit on some similar themes there.
Yeah.
On a lot of things, and I think that going into a lot of the information that I've looked into, that people may not believe that natural law is a thing, but the people I believe that are at the top of our human system understand the principle of natural law, and that's what they live by. So it gives them, in order to justify some of the plans and things that are carried out in the world, they have to show those plans and things to you so that you were made aware. And if you weren't able to take any action to correct that, then it's basically your tacit agreement. So even though you were basically you've been notified, but you may not be aware of that notification, which gets into a whole difference between nescience and ignorance. So if you're nescient, that means you have like completely an unawareness, like you're totally unaware. Whereas ignorance is, I am aware of this, but I'm choosing to ignore it.
Mm-hmm. Going too far as to say it's actually gross negligence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in terms
you've presented the information and you've chosen to ignore it and basically take the blue pill, like in the Matrix. Like, I understand that something's wrong and something's going wrong, but I am choosing to do nothing and put it out of my mind.
Yeah. I think Ayn Rand, I hope I'm quoting this correctly. We can ignore reality, but we can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good way of laying it down there. So, and I do have Mark Passio's presentation on the science of natural law pulled up that I can show briefly.
Yeah. Go and let's get into that, and then I have a few follow-up questions I have, if you don't mind.
Okay. All right. Let me pull this up right now. Here.
Man-made, binding and unchangeable conditions which govern the behavioral consequence of beings with the capacity for holistic intelligence. Natural law governs the aggregate or collective, free will behavioral choices of entire populations by manifesting the consequences of the behaviors that we choose. The consequences which we receive are always dependent upon whether our chosen behaviors are either moral or immoral, or in other words, right or wrong. While we all have free will, to choose which behaviors we will conduct, we are not insulated from the moral consequences of our behavioral choices. Natural law is a body of laws that operate within the unseen or non-physical realm, so they may be considered to be occulted or hidden laws of nature. These laws are built into the fabric of reality, just like gravity and electromagnetism. However, since these governing dynamics operate in the non-physical realm, human beings must incorporate a much wider worldview in order to recognize and accept the existence and operation of these laws. The understanding of natural law is absolutely not a belief system or a religion. The workings of natural law can be discovered and understood through its observable, measurable, and repeatable effects in our world. In other words, the understanding of natural law actually constitutes a science of morality, which requires no belief or faith. Belief or disbelief in these laws is completely irrelevant, as they exist as surely as any physical law, such as gravity, which we take for granted in daily life. Natural law is also known as moral law, cosmic law, universal law, spiritual law, the law of cause and effect, consequentialism, the golden rule, karma, and many other names. Why is understanding natural law so important? The understanding of natural law is critically important to human beings who seek to live in freedom and peace together. Since natural law delivers the consequences of an entire society's behavioral choices based on whether their behavior is moral or not, it is of fundamental importance for human beings to know with certainty what the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior actually is.
All right, so that's kind of the overview of natural law right there, and what I've been attempting to describe at the beginning of the stream here. So this is from Mark Passio in The Science of Natural Law, and I'll make sure to get that in the video description. It's very, very much worth you taking the time to dive into this whole video. So Mark,
Good. I'm looking forward to that.
Passio and The Science of Natural Law.
So, kind of getting back to the concept of religion before, if we have two religions that are promoting the exact opposite actions around the same scenario, what is the method for determining which one's moral, which one's immoral?
Yeah, it basically goes to right action and anything that would violate what is a right action. So all kinds of religions can, and plenty of people that say they have all the answers and are going to give you all the answers have done all kinds of insane things to people that, would violate other humans' individuality and ability to be free and have their own free will and create their own decisions. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it can be called mind control, really. Like if you say that you can justify this thing even though it's wrong, you have to really find that objective truth. You have to seek that objective truth in reality. And I mean, during our lifetimes, I know in my lifetime, I've seen how some of my actions have played out and how they have resulted in different consequences, going down like a more negative path and a path that was self-destructive, and seeing how that played out. And then on the contrary, understanding how that played out in my life, that I want to choose to do the opposite, which is perform right actions. And not to say that any human being is going to mess up along that path, but if you're aligning yourself toward that highest potential that you have, toward right action, that you're going to see that it's going to work out a lot better for you in reality. And just being a person that is not trying to screw people over all the time just so that you can gain the advantage or the upper hand on people, and making good with your word and performing to your highest ability, trying to get to your highest potential, I think is a way better path to go down. Like, I think that the teachings that Jesus was talking about, I think, kind of hit on that. Even like he mentioned with the Tao, is kind of heading in that direction, I believe. It's been a long time since I've read it, but
Sure.
But yeah.
Okay, so it sounds as if there is the potential that one derives one's sense of morality from one's religion.
Some people can derive that morality from religion, but I think it is a discoverable thing, like Mark Passio was talking about, just by going out into the world and living your life and seeing how the things that the actions you take and the consequences that are derived from those actions. I mean, that is a discoverable thing, like not necessarily needing any particular religion to discover that.
Have you ever heard of Euthyphro's dilemma?
No.
So basically, it's Gottfried Leibniz kind of just summarized it pretty well. Is it good and just because God wills it, or whether God wills it because it's good and just, right? So it really is, which is coming first, right? And so this is why I'm bringing in the concept of religion. And my personal opinion, I think this can smack up against the idea of natural law or natural science, because if we're saying that the natural law is paramount, it has primacy, okay, that's fine. But then there are certain religions that basically promote and mandate that we actually have to do the exact opposite of what is natural law, right? And I think this is where Euthyphro's dilemma kind of brings these two together. That's kind of the Venn diagram right there of that. So if we talk about some religions, in fact, many religions are actually religiously intolerant, right? They won't tolerate other religions. Some religions will say, and I'm not going to name names, but I'll call it religion X. Say, you either convert, or you have three options: pay a tax, I think it's leave, or essentially die.
Mm-hmm.
By our hands. And the proponents of that religion would say, this is not a violation of your rights, because this is X God is saying this. X God has ultimate dominion over the land, and X God gets to decide how this happens. It is X God that is deciding what is natural law. So how do we reconcile that?
Yeah, that is a tough one, because if somebody has been raised in whatever whatever religion, and being told a certain worldview,
Mm-hmm.
that that it would be very difficult to break that from them, in order for them to see that there's uh, you know, how that plays out uh, in the aggregate, in the larger sense of all the interactions that are happening between individuals on the planet. So it would be quite a struggle. And I don't entirely discount religion either, because I do think that it does give people some sense of morality, and it can instill some morality in people, getting close to what we would describe as objective truth, and what I would describe as objective truth. And I do see, like, in cases in history, specifically in communism, how they wanted everyone to believe, basically be atheistic, so that they could pull off whatever they wanted to and justify it, because now that there is no foundational truth, that we can create whatever we want. I do have an example of that here from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, quote from him, and I'll pull that up real quick. Uh, so this comes from victimsofcommunism.org. And this quote here is: "Within the philosophical system of Marx and Lenin, at the heart of their psychology, hatred of God is the principal driving force, more fundamental than all of their political and economic pretensions. Militant atheism is not merely incidental or marginal to communist policy. It is not a side effect, but the central pivot. To achieve its diabolical ends, communism needs to control a population devoid of religious and national feeling, and this entails the destruction of faith and nationhood. Communists proclaim both of these objectives openly, and just as openly go about carrying them out." So yeah, I think in order to justify whatever you want, you have to destroy any idea that there might be a creator, because that is giving you basically carte blanche to make up the rules as you go along, so to say.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit. There's a really good book I recommend that people consider, The Ominous Parallels by Leonard Peikoff.
Okay.
And it's basically it's a brilliant study of America today, and the quote unquote ominous parallels with the chaos of pre-Hitler Germany. This came out, I think, in 1984. So here it is 40 years later. And unfortunately, I think we're starting to see some ominous parallels between the United States and Nazi Germany, unfortunately. And what Peikoff talks about, and he was a protege of Ayn Rand, and what he talked about is that Nazi Germany didn't have the religion of the state; it was the religion of state, where the state was an actual superorganism, and it was it would have been considered supernatural in a sense, that and thus it had its clerics, it had its Cenobites, if you will, where only a few were attuned to what the state had, the superorganism had to say, and and if you couldn't hear the state, well, then you weren't one of the chosen, and thus you had to depend upon the select few who could, and in this case we know who that was, right? and this one individual could divine, the true intention of the state, and that was their God, that was their religion. So where I'm pushing back on this is, while I do think that the useful idiots of communism, which I think Vladimir Ilyich Lenin talked about, the useful idiots, I think they were definitely atheistic. I definitely think they were militant atheists. But I also think that they were they had their they had the religious tendencies, because the idea that they did believe that there was the superorganism of the state, and that the more individuals you had in the state, the bigger the superorganism became, and that it had its own will, and that the people needed to essentially worship the superorganism, the state, and carry it out. And it really starts to get into the whole concept of philosophy kings, of only the select few had this divine inspiration, this divine connection in there. So
that comes from Plato, right? From the Republic.
I think that's correct. Yeah, and so there were also in the medieval ages, there were the philosophy kings, right? They considered themselves like the King of England, right? He considered himself to be the pinnacle of not just the state, but this religious organization, equivalent of Catholic Pope, right? The only individual who could truly divine the will of that God. And so I think and this, by the way, I think historically speaking, this is where we get the term common sense, right? Common sense meaning it's anyone can figure it out on their own, but common meaning commonly sensed, right? So if I have this aluminum cup or can right here, I can sense it with my common senses, right? So that concept of common sense was a pushback against the philosopher kings. And so while I think I agree with the sentiment that Solzhenitsyn talked about, is the idea of pushing militant atheism, I think what really happened was they're just saying, no, get your religion out of the way so I can install my religion.
I believe so. Yeah, exactly. I think as humanity, we're all need to believe in something, and something is going to take the place of, you're going to have some kind of belief. And like you said, yeah, somebody, if you don't have that foundation in the creation and the creator, I think if you don't have a foundation, then you're able to be sold, like I was saying earlier, you're able to be sold a belief system, right? So that's, for any of these things, whether the right or the left, more toward the fascism side or more toward the communist side, that if you're not rooted in what is right and what is objective and what is the absolute objective truth, then you can be sold whatever thing to put order into the world. There's going to be some leader that steps up and says, everything's screwed up, I'm going to make it right. And instead of taking your personal responsibility to make the change happen, then you're going to abdicate that out to some figure that's going to say that I'm going to solve all the problems and give, all the power to me, instead of trying to solve those problems individually.
Mm-hmm. So what about in terms of religions? Typically religions have their religious texts, right? And they have their edicts, if you will, whatever you want to call them, right? Within Christianity, they call them the Ten Commandments, and in Judaism, right? The Ten Commandments. The Quran has theirs. So how do we apply this concept of natural law and objective, meaning it's not subjective, it's universal, it's measurable, demonstrable,
repeatable,
Yeah, right. Ideally, right, immutable.
Immutable. Yep.
And when we have these edicts from different religions, so let's take one that I think would resonate with a lot of people. Thou shalt not kill, right? And just
Yeah.
keep in mind, this is after how many layers of translation and translation, curation, right, on there. So we have thou shalt not kill, and then there was an example you gave, which I think I agree with, around in self-defense, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not aware of any qualifiers in the Old Testament or the New Testament around the Ten Commandments. So if one engages in self-defense and something, I personally would probably might find that the person's actions, the defendant's actions, were justified, and they do end up causing the death of another person. Where do we land on that? And then where does objective morality fit with that?
Yeah, it goes to that idea that you own yourself, so so that you have that right in order to self keep yourself preserved. And if somebody's in direct threat of your life, I guess that would be the point where you're justified in the self-defense act. So
I guess what I'm getting at though is if the Ten Commandments are saying, and I'm not trying to pick on Christianity, it's just one of the religions I happen to know fairly well, right?
Yeah.
Thou shalt not kill, and you want the person as the defender, right? The self-defender, they basically have a choice. And this is not like some edge case, right? Unfortunately, this happens all the time around the world. They kind of have an A/B choice. It's him or me, right? If I take that commandment, thou shalt not kill, at its purest form, especially within that particular religion, couldn't one then say, well, then the individual actually has a responsibility to just go ahead and be assaulted, as long as they're not killing someone else?
Then you're getting into, I guess, the argument of pacifism, which would be like absolutely no violence whatsoever. And I think the slope that you start going down with that is now the world is in fact a violent place, and that if you take no actions to have any sort of defense, that you're inviting more violence to happen. So it breaks down. I mean, there were pacifists in the past that were just living out there. I think some of the monks in Europe, as an example of that they were like complete pacifists, and they were just minding their own business, basically like the hobbits in Lord of the Rings, but things started to deteriorate around them, and like they were the little oasis in amidst a lot of chaos. And so once folks found out that they weren't going to fight back, they became assigned for what?
Emboldened to continue to push forward.
Basically that everybody was like, hey, these guys over here aren't going to fight back while we're taking their stuff. Come on, it's a big party, we take all their stuff. So you're inviting more violence by taking no action in order to defend yourself. So you have that ability to make that choice, but like I said, there are consequences to that. So if you want to go down I don't think it is right to be a pacifist, because that is only allowing more evil to happen in the world, more wrong actions to take place. So I think that's, the argument for self-defense is that it does put a stop to a wrong that is being done.
So then at that point, the individual gets to apply their own qualifiers to the 10 Commandments.
So we can throw the thou shall not kill. I mean, I've heard this before, because like I've had my brother talk to me about this, and I asked him the question, if somebody is coming into your house with the intent on hurting, tying you up and then hurting your family and possibly murdering them, are you going to stand there and just do nothing because the thou shall not kill principle, and thinking, if you applied that into go into complete pacifism, I mean, then what does that do for society? I mean, what does that do for you as an individual? Like, that totally really breaks down, and all of the outlying consequences of all that, is pretty devastating.
Okay, let me push back on that a little bit, because we have an actual example of that happening within the past 5-10 years. There was in Pennsylvania Dutch, you have the Amish country, right? And there was a mass shooter over there. Went through and just slaughtered quite a few Amish people. And every person there, to a person, chose not to engage in any sort of violence, and especially, not to try to kill the attacker, the assaulter. And they went in so far as to forgive the individual who did it and reach out to the criminal's family to console them, which, I appreciate that. But my point with that is, they didn't engage in acts of killing. They didn't. In fact, they definitely took a pacifist, role in that whole thing, and they're still around. So, does that falsify your assertion?
I don't think so, because if somebody would have intervened, then they could have potentially saved other lives in their community. So, yeah, I think, if someone would have intervened and stopped that, then they would have stopped that wrong action from taking place, from that person taking the life of those other free individuals. So
it gets back to my original question: is, do we as individuals get to put our own qualifiers onto things such as religious edicts?
I think that, like I was attempting to define, is that it doesn't matter, what specific religion you have. There are these underlying rule sets of our reality. So just like Newton's law, where you have every action has an equal and opposite reaction, those things will play out in our timeline in reality. And these things are the, fundamental what dictates of how this whole thing works, how this entire reality system works. And if you, I guess, kind of take like a broad view of how a system works, when you look at human beings as a type of system, and kind of like an engineering perspective, that the more you have people that are a moral people that choose to do right actions in the aggregate of society, that the more humans flourish, whereas you have the aggregate of people choosing to do wrong actions, then you have a society that can collapse and go into complete chaos. So
we talked a little bit about objective morality. What would you consider to be moral relativism?
So moral relativism is that concept of, my truth, that, I'm speaking my truth because it's coming from how I understand morality uh, in my mind, and I can kind of make up whatever, disregarding what is observable and discoverable. That whole idea, like you would basically disregard consequences and say, I can do whatever I want because I can harm whoever I want, or do whatever I feel like doing, because I get to make up the rule set. Is moral relativism. Somebody can make up whatever rules to justify any action they take, whether it be harming someone else or you know uh, just completely causing chaos all around them.
So, okay, so let's say we had an individual, and this just happened just recently. There were some riots where there were it was about two weeks ago. There were some young men who pushed a rock off a bridge, and they basically it caused not a bridge but an overpass on a highway, and it hit a car windshield. One could say, I wouldn't argue this. One could say they were using natural law, right? They were using the laws of physics, and they may have violated the rights of the passengers in there, but they were still following natural law. What does that can those two things coexist?
I wouldn't. So natural. I think you're describing natural law in a different sense there, that about the laws of nature and the physics of nature, but not the natural law principles of dictating human choice. So I would separate those two. So they're making a choice knowingly. I mean, you throw knowingly that they were going to potentially cause harm to people,
Mhm.
and they made that choice to do something that would cause harm to other people. So, they're going to get the consequences. The consequences are going to come around to them for making that choice.
So, all right, so let's go one layer deeper on there. So the people on the overpass were violating the rights of the people in the vehicle, correct?
Yeah.
Right. And if I understand correctly, you're kind of making that the idea of individual rights and self-defense as a central part of objective morality. Am I framing that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
So then, how did you get to that point where um, rights became a part of the framework of objective morality?
Because it's dictated by the choices that you make and those underlying consequences. So that all humans have free will. Otherwise we would be automatons here on the planet. We'd be just running about our days as robots, basically, and not able to make our own choices and decisions. So You know, the fact that we have the free will to make those choices, you have to understand what is a real right action. And it does involve action, because you can have some concept, but it's the actions that play out to create the consequences in reality.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about the idea that under the objective morality framework, at least the way we're discussing it, free will is a necessary component of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, if an attacker's coming to my house, I'm a pacifist, and I use my free will to say I don't want to kill this person. It's against my religion. Isn't that still within the framework of objective morality? And because I'm using my free will, and I'm trying to follow the edict of my religion, thou shalt not kill.
I mean, it would, you're making that choice, so you're accepting the consequences of that choice, basically.
Mm-hmm. Even if I die. But then doesn't that run up smack against what you mentioned before, that if we allow this sort of thing to happen, then it can embolden others to engage in more violence later on?
It does contradict it. Yeah.
Okay. So then it sounds as if a crucial component to this, and I'm trying to put together different parts here, is you're saying a crucial component of objective morality is that the individual has responsibility to act in such a way that it continues society, or it sets the conditions where society can continue.
That life, basically, that life in and of itself, and life continues, I think, in my mind.
Okay, so in that case, all right. So if we take it at the individual level, in that particular case of a home invader, one of us is going to die. You know, from my perspective, it could be, well, I die and he lives, or he dies and I live. The same number of people have died and the same number of people have lived. Right? We could argue that, but I have no objective measure. So you're talking about objective morality, I have no direct objective measure for this person and other people behind him engaging in more violence against society because they're quote unquote emboldened by me, by my pacifism.
So yeah.
And thus it doesn't fit with the objective morality framework. At least I don't think it would.
So that person deciding to take the pacifist life is going to violate those. I mean, that person is going to derive consequences from taking that other individual's life. I mean, that's not devoid. It's not devoid of what is going to happen to him.
I apologize. Let me clarify. In that instance, I allow the attacker to kill me.
Right.
So from my point of view, in terms of net results that are measurable, demonstrable, one person's dead and one person's alive in both instances, right? But in terms of objective,
yes.
Go ahead.
I guess that kind of reminds me of like the utilitarian philosophy, where it's like the trolley problem, where you have, you know, the decision of whether or not to save one person or a group of people, but you know nothing about who these people are, or, you know, that one person you saved may have been a serial killer, you know. Those 4 people may have been total garbage people, and you chose to save them, you know. Well, what about the third option? They don't give you a third option. So,
and the people who are really tough, they take the trolley problem and they say, okay, I've got two people on one rail, and the trolley's already heading towards the two people, and then I've got a baby on the second rail. If the trolley continues around the original path, the two people die and the baby lives, right? And
Yeah.
from a, an emotional point of view, I'm going to say emotional for lack of better words, emotional point of view, we would just be aghast at anyone who would say, well, kill the baby to save the two people.
Yeah.
Even though from an objective point of view, from a measurable point of view, it's that is the desired method is to take the active effort to move the trolley over to the second track.
I mean, yeah, this is why I don't like the trolley problem, because
nobody likes the trolley problem.
nobody likes it because, okay, to give me, there's always another option in my mind. It's like, okay, you're forcing me to make these two choices, but couldn't there be another option? Like, couldn't I stop the train in some way, or, derail that train, or so nobody dies, right? They don't give you that option. It's like, okay, make this one or another choice. And I think ultimately where it gets you is that like justification that all these people are bad, so let's get rid of, let's justify this by saying, okay, all those people were bad. And
so this gets into the whole concept of Kobayashi Maru, right? That's the science fiction version, right, of the trolley problem, right? You have no choices. They get this person really tunneled in, backed into a corner, and at that point, it's not even about what decision they're making. It's how they arrived at that. What was the methodology that they used to get there? And I think that's really what, in my understanding, what Starfleet is looking for, right? How are they going to reason their way through that? So point is, you could have two candidates who actually choose the exact same thing. Maybe they go into the neutral territory, but they have very different reasons for doing so. And I could see Starfleet gigging one and approving the other.
Yeah. The Kobayashi Maru is basically the impossible scenario.
That's right. Yeah,
there is supposed to be no solution.
Well, there's no good solution, right? It's all equally poopy, and they want to see how does this commanding officer candidate deal with it. I put it in our chat. So and it's funny because you talked about what's the third option, and Kirk went in and he tampered with the computer, right? So it showed it in the original series, the 1965 series, and then also the reboot with Chris Pine, where he was just like so cocky and so self-assured because he had hacked the system ahead of time. He was eating an apple, right? So it's just kind of funny, that you brought up the trolley problem, right? Which I think is totally applicable to what you're saying. And I think the Kobayashi Maru was the sci-fi version of the trolley problem.
Yeah. But basically he thought outside of the box and realized, okay, the whole thing is rigged, so let me not play by the rules. Basically, if they're gonna make it so that the scenario is impossible to win, let me game it so that there is an ability here.
And what's interesting is, I think it was in one of the movies, 2 or 3. It's either Wrath of Khan or Search for Spock, and Bones pointed out that Kirk never truly faced the Kobayashi Maru in Starfleet, number one, and number two, he never faced Kobayashi Maru in real life, within the Star Trek universe, right? He always had his little way out, and finally he had been put into a corner in 2 or 3, and he had his own personal Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah. Star Trek is when you look at Star Trek, the way that they show this whole thing. It's like with the Federation and everything like that, and I guess it's like the world, one world kind of government coming together
right.
to create a, they call it the Federation and all
That's
that
right.
stuff like that. And everybody basically doesn't have to work at this point. And now all humanity is focused on is exploration.
Yeah. It was a post scarcity society, right? And that was their utopia. Technology had come so far.
Basically a utopia, yeah.
Yeah. And they would have been considered essentially a type 1 Kardashev civilization because they could control all the energy of the planet, and use it, like you said, to devote to getting rid of want and go for purely scientific and artistic endeavors.
Sounds like a bunch of space communism.
What's funny is, so that's funny you're saying that, and we're bringing this up because in a way, if we think about it, and I think you made a really good point, is they had gotten rid of nations, the nation state, right? Individual nations. So at that point, within the Star Trek universe, they were dealing not with individual states or individual nations, but it's always planet to planet, right? The Klingons, right? The Romulans, from their planet, the Earthlings from their planets, and but it was singular government. Always, every one of these civilizations always had the planetary government, at the highest there, and yet every single one of them were against the Borg. Well, wait a second. If you're okay with getting rid of individual choice and individual nation states and having singular government, right, then in philosophically speaking, shouldn't they have been okay with having the Borg as being a part of the collective? I mean, these are planetary collectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just throwing that's just a throwaway, just to get people to think a little bit about it.
Well, when you get to know a little bit about Gene Roddenberry, which I saw this video of him a while back. So this guy was kind of messed up. So I don't know if you've ever seen this video where.
No. All right, I'm talking about Roddenberry.
Yeah, Gene Roddenberry, the guy that created Star Trek and everything. So here's an interview that he did one time where he was talking about some creepy stuff.
Your family.
I've been very fortunate in family. I've had 2 marriages, both happy. In my first marriage, I had 2 lovely daughters, and I had the joy in that marriage of girls. And girls are such delicious, sweet-smelling, wonderful things. I can still remember when they would be so clean and their hair done, their starched dresses, and how when they would bend over, the dresses would come up, and you'd see the panties, and little girls are totally beautiful things, and I was happy. I was lucky with my girls.
Yeah, yeah. Gene Roddenberry was a creep, man.
So maybe that's where maybe he was the inspiration for Captain James Tiberius Kirk, right? He's such a ladies' man.
Yeah. So he's a damn space communist pederast, I think. Well, I think now is a good time that we do a little kind of comedy break here.
Yeah, let's take a break on this.
And
I have a question about Alan Turing after this. I think what ties like it'll be part 2.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'll start off. We'll do the call, and I'll let you raise. So you sent me a video, and so this one is one that my buddy Robbie put together, and it is all about trusting the science. So here we go.
Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person.
Vaccine.
Trust the science.
Trust the science.
The superheroes. The scientists.
I'm tired of hearing that.
Oh, yeah.
Trust the science! Trust the science!
Chief, we found a witness.
Did you give him a full cavity search?
The witness?
Yes, you can never be too careful, Mort.
They don't trust science because science is increasingly untrustworthy.
Important papers can advance careers, generate media interest, and secure essential funding.
And government provides most of that funding.
Trust the science! Trust the science!
These people know something. I want full cavity searches. Everyone, go deep on them.
Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine is propelling it to record revenue. Last year, the company raked in more than $81 billion.
Trust the science! Trust the science!
All right. All right. So. And then
All right. I see your montage, and I raise you one torta. And anyone from New York, New Jersey, LA, and Texas will appreciate this.
All right. Here we go. Here. All right. Check that out. This one. This one, right?
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
Charlie Holmes, don't get fucked up in this bullshit. Stay straight, pendejo.
No sermons, they say, remember?
This is who I am. Charlie Holmes, don't get fucked up in this bullshit. Stay straight, pendejo.
No sermons, they say, remember?
This is who I am.
One of the guys I served with sent that. There's a group of us, and just all day, all night, we're just sending each other really offensive material. It's awesome.
When your buddy's pounding toward us, this is who I am. This is who I am, man. I can't stop. Can't stop. Hashtag can't stop, won't stop.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Mexican.
Yeah. And so for anyone who doesn't know, that came from a movie, Blood In, Blood Out. It came out, I think, in the late 80s. And it was a good movie. And it was kind of interesting because it showed, obviously it was an extreme example, right? But the dude who was on the right-hand side, he was of quote unquote mixed blood. I think it was of Hispanic and Caucasian, but he considers himself, he was Hispanic, right? He grew up in that culture, and that brought him a lot of grief. Yeah, there you go, Blood In, Blood Out.
I've never seen
good movie. Yeah, good movie.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, and I think there are other movies that kind of talk about the whole concept of a person who is on. Oh, I'm sorry, 1993. Sorry, people who are on two sides. They straddle cultures, right? And I was kind of in that, but in my case, I was actually really lucky because both sides were actually really nice, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
on my mom's side, it's Chinese, and her side of the family's really cool, really nice, and then my dad's side is here in the southeast, and they're really cool, and I get along with them really well. So I was very fortunate, and actually both sides were really cool. So when my mom met my dad's side of the family, they were very nice to her, very welcoming, and same thing on my mom's side. Ultimately, like my dad really won over my mom's parents, my grandparents.
That's interesting. Man.
Yeah, they were really impressed with him. So it was good all around.
Yeah, that is interesting. We had a girl that came in to intern where I work, and she's from Vietnam, and she was telling us about some of their cultural practices in Vietnam and stuff like that, and how like in marriages they had like a dowry that they practiced up until fairly recently where they kind of don't do that anymore, but mostly like their marriages were like arranged marriages and stuff like that. And yeah, the family had to, she said something about like, if the family didn't approve or whatever, that they would basically shun you. So like if you married for love or whatever of somebody that you really loved and the family didn't approve of it, basically you'd be entirely shunned. You could become entirely shunned.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, this would be, so if you're open to it, I would love to have this as a future episode.
Yeah.
You know, this is a huge topic, and I've changed my thinking on this quite a bit. So, you know, we talk about, you know, free will, right? And I'm a huge proponent of free will. I do think it exists, or that we have free will, I should say. And I do think people should be able to make their own choices, but I'm also a huge proponent of the idea of people having trusted cadre around them, trusted counsel around them, who can impart wisdom. And you know, I'm not sure about being conditional, but I understand it, right? I'm not sure I could provide conditional or conditions on marriage if I had a daughter or son. But I kind of get where where a parent would come from in that sense. Like, hey, you know, this person's kind of a shithead. You know, if you want to go this way, that's fine, but don't expect me to be standing shoulder to shoulder with you, and don't expect me to lend support for decades. You know, so it's a topic. It's become near and dear to my heart.
Oh yeah, it is interesting. I was listening to some guys talk on a podcast about how a lot of successful marriages have come from like arranged marriages. Actually, yeah. It is interesting.
It would be good to bring up Kevin Samuels. Kevin Samuels he was a he was a professional image consultant. Worked in sales for quite a few years. He had a very successful YouTube channel, and he was mid-50s when he passed away. This was about 2-3 years ago, unfortunately. And he was just going and going. He was pulling things together. He put on a great show all by himself. He did have people who moderated the chat, but he talked about this idea, and he's one of an influencer about changing my mind around having, you know, good people, good cadre around you to impart wisdom, you know, and provide some guidance. So I give him credit. Unfortunately, he passed away, and that train came to a screeching halt. I think he had a heart attack, unfortunately. But yeah, so it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, I think I've heard his name mentioned before. I guess it would be considered in the manosphere, basically.
You know that.
I haven't dove into his stuff.
Yeah, so I think some would agree with you, right? That he would be considered part of the manosphere. I think he would say no, he's not. He's just trying to, in his own words, he would say he's trying to bring peace and stability into the Black community. You know, he was basically skating uphill, you know, in doing that. But I give the guy credit. He had a really positive influence on, you know, literally hundreds of thousands of people. And he had his own Facebook group called The Mix. And it was only for Blacks and only for eligible bachelors and bachelorettes. And he's like, look, here are my results. I'm bringing Black people together into succcess,ful,
healthy relationships.
Yeah, healthy relationships, exactly. And, you know, I give the guy credit for really putting himself out there like that. Was not an easy task.
Yeah, I'll have to look into his stuff more. I've heard about him and heard people talking about him.
So just so fair warning for anyone who wants to watch a show, people interpret it as pretty abrasive and offensive. I did not interpret that at all. He had a limited window. He had about 2 to 3 hours per episode, and he's like, I got to get as many calls as I can, and I'm going to just bang, bang, bang through these calls. So he could be a little short and curt with people, but he was putting on a show, right? He had to kind of get through them. So, but people loved it. They just ate it up. when he passed away, I think he had a little over 1 million subscribers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I really miss him. He was great.
I'll be checking out his stuff.
Yeah.
So you brought up Alan Turing.
Yeah.
If you want to get into that.
He was the subject of a movie called The Imitation Game. He was a famous mathematician, a logician, a cryptanalyst. And he would have been around 27 when right around when World War II broke out, and he was brought on board by I forget what it may have been MI5 or MI6
MI6
at the time.
British
Yeah, and he worked in Bletchley Park. There's a few books on this, and he worked in a specific building called Hut 8. And if you know anything about Bitcoin mining, there is a publicly traded company called Hut 8, and I'm pretty sure it's named after this specific facility. And he's credited with breaking the Enigma machine that the Nazis were using. And the Nazis, you know, this was a brilliant piece of cryptology and engineering all in one. A very compact machine, the size of about a large typewriter, and it could convert what we call plain text, plain words, into ciphertext or codes, if you will. And it would be child's play for a modern computer to break it today, but back in the day, they didn't have computers to go through these brute force attacks. And Alan used just really out of the box thinking. And one of the important things that he did with it for breaking the Enigma machine was to, if you consider that when you're trying to break codes, you have essentially an exponentially growing number of keys that can be used to open up that virtual lock, if you will. It grows exponentially, geometrically almost. And Alan had a really good way of cleaving. And so if you think of it as a tree, he had a really good way of cleaving off entire branches that were lower on the tree. And by doing that, he eliminated massive numbers of possibilities. So going from things that would have been maybe 1 times 10 to the 15th possibilities, getting it down to maybe 1 times 10 to the 3rd, maybe 1,000 possibilities for the number of keys that could be used to break the Enigma code. So that one side, he developed a methodology for that, which is basically eliminating wrong answers. Okay, and the other side of it, he was able to instantiate his methodology through the I think it's called the Ultra Machine. I can't remember. It's in that article. And if you watch the Imitation Game, it was this massive electronic device, actually electromechanical device that was used to break the Enigma machine. And it was really just brilliant. And unfortunately, there were Polish mathematicians who also broke the Enigma machine concurrently, but they weren't given credit at the time because they too kept it. They kept it, to themselves, which is understandable. They didn't know who they could trust, right? So it was concurrent efforts and concurrent successes. The reason why I bring this up is because the whole idea of why I focus so much on cognitive biases and logical fallacies is these are methodical ways of eliminating wrong answers. I think it's so important to do that. And obviously, in the case of World War II, this probably brought the war to a much faster close because it really changed the course of the war, and it spun up the Ultra program, which was pivotal in turning things around for the Allies, especially the British. And I think that having methodical methods of eliminating wrong answers is so important, because then we're not going down the path of trying to explore every single possibility that's out there. If we can have kind of the epistemological toolkit, if you will, and I get that term from other people, if we can have an epistemological toolkit that's available to us, that really shortcuts the searching process, this back and forth. And I, the audience saw us, having good dialogue, right? And I hope it was good dialogue. And it was questioning. And I think that this is something that I've kind of stumbled upon. Obviously, this gets into the really lower layers of philosophy, right? Metaphysics, ethics, logic, even aesthetics, right, to a degree. And these are things that go back 2,500 years, maybe longer than that, right? But there was that attempt at trying to formalize these methods of thinking. And I think that we could all learn about just some of the basics of methodical means of applying these methodical means, right, to everyday lives. And it really shortcuts the cycle to creating good, valuable conversation, productive conversation, and then also our daily lives. Like, how do we live our daily lives?
Yeah, it really has to be a process, and people being able to talk to each other and being able to work through issues. I mean, you just have to have difficult conversations sometimes and attempt to see where your thinking lies and maybe where your blind spots are.
Yeah.
And that can only be done by going out and talking to people. Yeah.
I think I've learned more from my debating failures than my debating successes, and sometimes it would take, someone would present some argument and I didn't have a way to address it. And it wasn't until sometimes a year later, I'm like, oh, why didn't I say this? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have fit within that methodical, methodology, if you will, methodical framework, right, for getting rid of wrong answers.
Right. Yeah, it's if you wanted to get into talking about the logical fallacies part, maybe we can cover a couple of those before we wrap it up tonight.
Yeah, let's do that. So last week we talked about argument from authority. I think that's what we looked at, and it's basically because I said so, therefore it's true. So just take that. And we see in Carl Sagan's the Sagan baloney detector. I think that was the first rule: no argument from authority. This week I thought there would be a couple we could talk about. Appeal to common belief and ambiguity fallacy. And I'm choosing these because I just had a civil debate with a buddy of mine who's a theist, and this was, I think, last week, and he was using both of these. So the appeal to common belief is when the claim that most or many people in general or of a particular group accept the belief is true is presented as evidence for the claim. Accepting another person's belief or many people's beliefs without demanding evidence as to why that person accepts the belief is lazy thinking and a dangerous way to accept information. The ambiguity fallacy: when an unclear phrase with multiple definitions is used within the argument, therefore does not support the conclusion. Some will say single words count for the ambiguity fallacy, which is really a specific form of a fallacy known as equivocation. Regardless of the ambiguity fallacy, I think that unfortunately this is one of the biggest causes for debates between people and people getting frustrated with each other, is because they're using the same word in two or more completely different meanings, and they're just basically just talking past each other and not realizing they're talking past each other. And I think it's so important that as soon as possible, we within reason try to define terms as quickly as possible. Now that can cause a whole host of other problems, like really long conversations, right? Or frustrations, because maybe both sides have not actually thought about this the definition of the word, Right. So then there's just the quibbling over the definition of that, right? Of whatever that word is, right? That brings up a whole host of other problems. But at least it starts to get down to the lower levels, the lower philosophical levels. So my buddy was using the appeal to common belief when he was talking about, why religion has, Z number of believers, therefore that creates validity for it. And I brought up, well, at one point, your why religion was only by, a very, 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 very small number of people, so by your own reasoning, that makes that religion less valid. And he didn't like that.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to I guess the root word of religion from is religare, I believe. And if you see,
yeah, so I think religare and religio or religio, I think those are the two etymologies.
Yeah. And from what I understand, that root that let's just look up etymology of religion. Religio. So from Etymology Online, I've heard this. I guess this reference is from 1200. Religoum, state of life bound by monastic vows. Also, action or conduct indicating a belief in divine power and reverence and desire to please it. Religare, to go through again in reading or in thought. Or religare. I wonder. So I've heard Mark Passio talk about one of the etymologies of that word is partially is to bind. But
so would that and I'm asking because I'm ignorant. When you say to bind, does he mean binding to oneself to something else, or does he mean binding one's behaviors, or something different? Do you know?
I believe he was referring to it as talking about a form of potential mind control, or to bind the mind.
Okay. Interesting.
And like I was talking about earlier, is like some yeah, I was raised Catholic, so I could kind of see it in myself. Like, you have a lot of the Catholic guilt on you.
Yeah, right.
A lot of stuff,
Yeah, you'd make a good Italian.
Yeah. So I mean, like, in a lot of in a lot of regards, I think they were teaching good stuff about living rightly and justly in the world.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, there's good stuff in religion, but for me personally, I don't subscribe to religion anymore as an individual, personally. Yeah. But I see a lot of good in it, because people can find community of people that are attempting to live a better, a more people that are attempting to build that trust, have like a trusting community of people that get together and have that social interaction with others that are attempting to live a more righteous livelihood.
Yeah.
So I see good in it.
So
But
one thing I've seen about that, because I think you're touching on something that's really important from a purely sociological point of view, right? That's I'm not here to promote or denigrate, but the idea that there's a certain compactness, right? When two people say they meet for the first time, they've never met before. I'm a Hindu. Oh, I'm a Hindu. I'm a Muslim. I'm a Muslim, right? There's that immediate identification, and there's kind of a compactness, if you will, that what comes along with this word, follower of, or phrase, I should say, follower of Christ, right? I'm a Hindu, right? I'm a Zoroastrian. There's this entire set of values and maybe a lore and possible experiences that come along with that, and it's kind of like language itself, right? Is there, like I said before, language is just a common lie we say to each other, right? And just saying that those words, I am an religious practitioner, in a way that's kind of like currency. It buys you a lot of trust, right? When a culture or society, and in a way that almost provides a sort of lubrication, a societal lubrication that goes along with that. And then guards can come down a little bit, right? People can relate a little bit, and kind of gets back to what we were saying before, is then people can start to work together, and we don't have to have these high bars of these barriers, of trust barriers that people have to get over. And I think that from a purely sociological point of view, it provides a very interesting lubricant.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, the folks that are out there in the freedom community, I think we're attempting to establish that with each other.
Yeah.
Outside of, some of these things, and attempting to make connections with each other, so that we can build an alternative to the systems that are in place that are that we don't agree with.
So that's a interesting point you're bringing up, and I think it's an important point. Is if I just throw the word prepper out there, right? There are some people they wear that as a badge of honor, right? Like, yeah, I'm a freaking prepper, man, fucking A. And then other people like, yeah, you're a fucking whack job, And it's interesting how you could take the whole concept of compact labels, right? Whether it be religious application or I'll say societal application, and you get pretty much the exact same thing, right? One group of people or one pairing of people, you get almost immediate trust, and like, yeah, I like him, and then other side you get almost immediate distrust. One side says you're completely naive and you live in an ivory tower. The other one says you just want to own, you just like your guns, right? And you can almost guess, a person's political alignment just based upon how they react to certain words. It's almost becomes a litmus test in its own right, and it's kind of interesting how that happens. And I think you and I've talked about this before. The whole concept of tribalism, it's kind of down at the somatic gene level. How you talk about natural law, right? How in a way our genetics adapted to that. What was the thing that allowed our DNA to continue to progress, through generations, right? And it was the natural law, right? Or the Tao, whatever, I don't know what we call it, but it's almost as if we kind of almost we didn't have a choice in being tribalistic.
Yeah. I mean, when it gets down to it, there's strength in numbers, and when you have people that are predatory, which that is the case. I mean, there are predatory humans that will go after other humans.
Yeah.
That you are stronger with more with more people together. And yeah, I mean, it leads to that basically is self-preservation.
Yeah, we could even go so far as to say it goes from being purely monospecies to polyspecies, right? In the sense of like, in terms of the example we've been talking about is just people working together. But then, canines, right? Canis lupus was domesticated, however many, about 50,000 years ago, roughly, and became Canis familiaris, I think it was. So you have that, and then we have bovines, right? We have, cows. They get our protection and longer lives, and pretty much almost zero threats for 99.9% of the lives, right? And they get pretty comfortable living, at least the ones on like the kind of cows you and I eat, right? Right. And then so there is that polyspecies tribalism, right? There was that cooperation, working together. You could say the same thing about equine, right? So yeah, that's I think that kind of there's just the general natural law, if you will, that kind of built up from there.
Yeah, because you were basically force multiplier with a dog that could protect. That it could help you out and protect, and also the horse became a force multiplier as well. Early on in humanity, being able to, ride that horse into an area and be able to, if you had mastered a horse and the people that you were up against had no clue how to use horses or other animals. I mean, the Persians were using like elephants, I think, and all kinds of stuff to be force multipliers in battles and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it is we've just been in this competition game trying to see whoever can come out on top for the most part.
And I think that starts to spill over a little bit into game theory, right? Is force multiplication, which is very much an important part of game theory.
Well, we should devote a show to that for sure.
That's a really cool topic, by the way, game theory.
Yeah.
So I used to be a futures trader. You know about this, and I remember my broker told me just as I was getting into this, he said, "You need to study game theory." And we're talking about the late '90s. I'm like, "What? Game theory? What are you talking about?" He's like, "Just trust me. Just go research it." I'm like, "Okay." And he was right. He was 100%. I had no idea how right he was until I just started cracking open the books. Like, oh shit. I'm really lucky he said something to me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That would be a good one to do a deep dive on. Was there another one of the logical fallacies that you wanted to cover before we end it tonight?
Those are just the two that I thought appeal to common belief and ambiguity fallacy.
Okay.
I will say that for ambiguity fallacy, I mentioned before that's a cause of a lot of frustration amongst good intending people, right? But then there are the people who are not good intending, and they will deliberately misuse terms to try to thread that philosophical needle to get their own way. And it kind of starts to lean towards what they call the Mott and Bailey logical fallacy, where it's a military structure. You have your Mott, which is basically your main military structure, and your Bailey is essentially an extension off of the Mott. And the idea is one takes a very intense and extreme view that's considered the Bailey, and that's the one that's far out from the norm. And then once they're challenged on it, they bring it back to the Mott, the mild, and they say, well, okay, yeah, I don't agree with the Bailey, but yeah, the Mott's fine. And in reality, what they were looking to do was just get the person to agree with their Mott position, which the other person wouldn't have done if they had not presented it as a Mott and Bailey model. And for those who are into political science, that's what Donald Trump does in a way in terms of how he negotiates. He asks for like 2 or 3 times what he really wants. He plants his flag way the hell out here, and then he negotiates back to a certain point. You know, the Bailey's the bold. That's how I remember. Bailey's bold, Mott is mild. He plants his flag in the Bailey, right? And he tries to negotiate back from there. And when he gets to the Mott, that's what he really wanted in the first place. But it makes it the other side think that they you know, they really gave it to him. You know, it was a fight. Like, no, this is what he was aiming for the whole time. You know, so Mott and Bailey. So the reason I say is because I think a lot of people use Mott and Bailey, and kind of in conjunction with the ambiguity fallacy. You know, and when they're trying to, I think when they're not acting in good faith.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, it's a skill of rhetoric of being able to twist words around to benefit you when you want them to.
That's right. That's a good way. That's a very good way of expressing it. Yep. It is a rhetorical tool, and you know, it's therein lies the I'll say the hazards of rhetoric. Right? Is, you know, we used to speak in sound clips. Right? Again, it's compact linguistic forms. Right? Common lies, and we tell to each other. And then you meet the person who doesn't agree, who doesn't co-sign your bullshit, right? Then there's frustration, right? And there is synthesis, antithesis, you know, dialectic, right? I'm sorry, synthesis. I'm sorry.
Antithesis,
thesis, antithesis,
synthesis.
Yeah, that's it.
The Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah. Thank you. And so, you know, that kind of gets into the whole idea of, you know, people don't examine the underlying philosophical terms. And I think you and I are doing a pretty good job at trying to get down to the root levels, you know.
Attempting to.
We're trying, but at least we're trying.
It's hard to tackle, yeah.
It is hard to tackle, right? But at least we're trying. And I think a lot of people don't do that. And they don't challenge the most important person they should be challenging, which is themselves, right? And like, you know, I have, for example, I have a definition for rights, which is the potential, but not the obligation for any action such that one does not cause unsolicited harm to others. And it took me a while to kind of pull that together. It's a working definition, right? It's the best I can come up with. It's 19 words, maybe a little wordy, right? But it's the best definition I can think of in terms of civics, right? And which is the philosophy of society and government. I think that's the hazard of rhetoric sometimes, is we just throw stuff out there and we don't think about what are the implications. We don't think about the words, the ambiguity of certain words, you know. And I think people, they just march forward, they just double time through certain arguments, and they can lead themselves down bad paths because they haven't studied the Alan Turing method of like getting rid of bad branches, right? And maybe they arrive at bad conclusions.
But the only way to get better is by engaging.
Yeah.
And you have to go through those things with people and have the conversations. I know several conversations I've had in the past have been like, okay, they've woken me up to say, okay, I've got a blind spot here.
Yeah.
I need to dig deeper into this because I'm not explaining it very well so that somebody else can understand it, or my concept of it was entirely off base.
Yeah.
And I need to do more research to get down to the base of this thing. So, and those have been revealed through having conversations where I thought I had some way of being able to explain it to somebody to persuade them about the way I was thinking.
Yeah.
And it totally fell apart when somebody brought up one thing and I was like, well, I don't have an idea of that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to do some more research. So
yeah,
thank you in a way.
Yeah. I like that because I think that necessitates a certain humility, right? Or being humble without being humiliated, right? I think going in that of being comfortable saying I don't know.
Yeah.
And most people are not comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that civil debate I was having, that debate discussion, alcohol discussion I had with my good buddy last week. He's I'm going to say he was ex-religion, and he was asking me like, well, what if you found out that ex-religion is true? You know, ex-God is the actual one. What would you think of it? I'm like, I'd be happy, you know, because at least I know, you know. And I said, now I need to turn this around on you. You're ex-religion. What if you find out why religion is? And he's really gone, you know, head and shoulders into this thing. He's leaning. He just found this faith last year. He's really going into it. I said, what if you found why religion with why God was demonstrably just as demonstrable as you're telling me ex-religion and ex-God? How would you feel about that? Would you be happy? He's like, no, I'd be pissed. I'm like, why? He's like, because I've wasted all this time in ex-religion and ex-God, and I find out it's not true. And I said, but shouldn't you be rejoicing because you've actually been presented with a good methodology and actual solid proof that it is, you know, X or I'll say it is Y, and you know for sure there's no more doubts. And he's like, no, I'd be pissed. And I think that's a material difference. Like I really appreciate what you just said a minute ago. Like you're thankful when people kind of point something out. I'm like, hey, thank you for pointing out my blind spot. You give me something really deep to chew on, and I appreciate that. And you know, my friend was when I presented him that possibility, he was not happy about it. So I'm like, okay, that's intense.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be when you have to challenge your worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And what you thought was real or truth is, you know, not accurate. So yeah. It's tough to go through that and to acknowledge it and be incredulous, as the great Rabbi Richard Grove talks about on Grand Theft World.
One thing that anytime I think there's a possibility that someone else and I are about to enter into a debate, and I really do my first best to try to keep it civil, like a true productive civil debate. As soon as possible, I try to ask them, okay, before we get into this, are you open to being wrong? And
that's a good question to ask, yeah.
Right? And 90% of the time, instead of, because that's, in my opinion, I try to make things as binary as possible, yes or no, up, down, left, right. Instead of just saying yes or no, they always they come back with, about what? I said, no. Are you open to being wrong? And most people, unfortunately, have a really difficult time with just stating outright, yes, I'm open to being wrong. I asked that with one guy, and he was offended. And it came out in his voice. He was offended that I asked him the question. He said, no, absolutely not. It's like, okay. we have a very different philosophical bent here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, our talk tonight makes me want to think more on that one question that you asked.
Which one was this?
The does it fit into natural law if this person is deciding to not defend themselves?
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I want to think about that more.
I take that as a compliment. So thank you.
Yeah. So if you guys like this conversation, you could probably catch more of it at the event that is going on this weekend, which is this unvaxxed singles camp out and swim party up in Manchester, Tennessee. and you can check that out. And so we got to connect with more people in the Unvaxxed group last night at our Freedom Cell meeting. They came out to the Freedom Cell. And so, yeah, I'm connected with them up in Tennessee and checking that out this weekend. So I'm hoping for.
Was that Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, this is
that's really funny.
Scott Armstrong's Twitter. Right?
That's really funny.
Butthead is Charlie Kirk. Yep.
That had to be AI right there.
May possibly.
Oh, that's great.
And then, so yeah, there's more events in that group going on too locally here. So Brianna came on for a stream earlier, but she's helping organize a local meetup here in our area in North Alabama. So they're doing one at the Burning Tree Country Club coming up on Saturday, August 16th. If anybody might want to check it out, and people that can have some conversations without being offended about anything and everything. So if you like that kind of stuff, come check it out.
That's good stuff right there.
All right, cool. So Jay, where can people check you out? And you do your Bitcoin meetup, and you have all kinds of,
so I'll send the link for the Bitcoin meetups that I manage. We get together twice a month. We're purely online. We're not selling anything. The only payment we require is good faith efforts. All we're trying to do is help people understand what Bitcoin is, how it works at a non-technical level, and then why it's so important to the world and to each individual. The name of the meetup is Bitcoin, Huntsville, Crypto, and Coffee. I'll make sure I send the link to Greg. And we're really trying to do everything we can to lower the barrier to entry. We understand that there's a lot of frustration around learning what Bitcoin is. And there's just the basics, like, okay, what is this thing? Why is it so important? And then, okay, I get it. How do I get some? How do I buy some? Right? It's so important. How do I get it off the exchange? And how do I hold it in my own wallet? You know, or should I use a wallet? Should I keep it on the exchange? Those basic questions. And these are sorts of things that we bring up every session. We usually have at least one newbie coming on board, and we love newbies because typically newbies ask like the best questions, the stuff that we forget that we need to address. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Greg. And it is every fourth Wednesday, every fourth Saturday, 6 p.m. on Wednesdays, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. 11 a.m. Central Standard Time on Saturdays. It's a good group of people. Andy and Justin are my co-hosts, and we are really tight with each other. We're all on the same page, and actually, it looks like August will be a banger of a month. We got quite a few people who have responded, RSVP'd. We're looking forward to it. We also have, if you get in on the into the session, we'll give you the link for our Telegram chat, so you can get into our Telegram group. And all day long, we're sending each other notifications. People have questions. What does this mean? How do I do this? How do I do that? And it's so important. Sometimes we're just sending each other articles, and just explaining why government always overreaches. Government always corrupts the monetary system, and thus they always corrupt their societies. And this is so important. This is the reason why I do this thing. That's why Andy and Justin do it as well, right? The three of us. And it's so important that we want to promote good philosophy. We want people to be able to promote their own good philosophy and not subordinate their value system to the government. And we want people to be able to succeed, because this fiat system is going to collapse. It is the biggest everything bubble we've ever seen in human history. It is global, and there's going to be a lot of pain. It's my hope that with people owning their own Bitcoin, they can get out of this. They can spit themselves out of the system. It's not just the red pill, it is the orange pill, the metaphorical matrix red pill, if you will. So we're trying to help people spit themselves out of the system.
Excellent. So yeah, if you guys are interested in that, go and join Jay's meetup at meetup.com. I'll make sure to have that in the show description at the end here. And yeah, if you guys like the show, if you got something out of it, please share it with some folks and help us get the word out on the channel here. We're doing this every other Thursday night. We'll be getting together and talking about different topics and doing some deep dives here with Jay on the channel. So and then also on the channel, I have Alan Booker set up as a guest and working on some future interview guests. So stay tuned for that kind of stuff. And otherwise, we'll catch you guys next time. And Jay, as always, thank you so much for all your hanging out and being a part of the show.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. We'll catch you guys later.